Welcome into a special edition of the PFF NFL show at night, as Dalton, Wasserman, and Trevor Sikkema are here with you guys to recap everything that we saw from the divisional round of the NFL. We're giving you guys our instant reactions. We're going to give you some of the instant grades for the games, that we saw here on Sunday. And of course, we're going to give you the final grades and our thoughts from what we saw on Saturday, as well as we have just 4 teams remaining and just conference championship weekend before we get to the Super Bowl. Dalton, how you doing? We have not done a night show yet for the PFF NFL show, as we're doing the grades release and the recap show. So how you feeling? Is the blood flowing? We just saw Ravens-Bills. How you feeling?
This is awesome. Oh, no, that last game stressed me out. I won't lie to you. And honestly, this divisional round gave us everything you could possibly ask for in a playoff weekend, right? All 4 games just had different elements to them that were heart-stopping at times, especially the 2 games today. But you know what? Now we get in here, it doesn't feel like 10 o'clock at night in here all of a sudden.
Don't tell me it feels like 1 p.m. because my brain needs to at least shut off a little bit before 4 a.m. to be able to get some sleep today.
Oh, I don't know if I got to drive to Atlanta tomorrow. I don't know if I got to find some way to get some, especially after that last game. I don't know how I'm going to sleep after that.
You're going to be sitting there staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sean McDermott having the gall to kick a field goal instead of go for it, which we'll get into in a second, but we are going to go through these games in descending order from most recent to then what we saw on Saturday. So we'll start with Bills and the Ravens, talk about that game, and then we will work our way backwards from the schedule. We start with that game, though. Buffalo Bills take down the Baltimore. We knew that this was going to be the best game that we saw this weekend, and it absolutely was. Came down to the very last play, and this one ended in a 27-25 victory for the Buffalo Bills, who will face the Kansas City Chiefs. And we'll get to a little bit more of a Bills-Chiefs preview at the end of the show when we talk about what Kansas City is bringing to the table from what we saw this weekend. Let's look at the early grades. Now, these are the final grades, but we do have some early grades here from this game, and we'll give you the top 5. So we'll start with the Buffalo Bills and the top 5 players there. Defensive tackle Ed Oliver standing up in a big way in this game. I've criticized their interior defensive line over the last couple of weeks throughout this season, but boy, did they show up big in this one. He's at the top of the list with an initial 85.7. Offensive tackle Spencer Brown behind him with an 82.5. Defensive tackle Daquan Jones with an 81.4. Wide receiver Khalil Shakir with a 78.8. Edge rusher Greg Rousseau rounding it out at number 5 with a 78.8. And then quarterback Josh Allen, not his best grade. It's a 69.3, but it's certainly not the worst and was exactly what they needed to get it done and seal this win, get to the AFC Championship. On Baltimore's side of things, Kyle Van Noy was their top-graded player with an 81.3. Defensive tackle Nnamdi Madubuike with an 80.9. Running back Justice Hill a 79.1. Safety Kyle Hamilton a 79.0. And then safety Ardarius Washington a 78.9. Lamar Jackson in this game, again, not his best. And we'll get into exactly what went into that. But ultimately, spit on an initial 71.1 overall grade. You and I sort of have the same stat that told the story here. We're just going to talk about it, I think, from 2 different sides of the coin and what happened with this result. So I'll leave it to you first, your stat that told the story and how you want to talk about this one here.
There are often in big games teams that beat themselves, right? And I think we have more than one game this weekend that ended up like this. But the Ravens, I think one thing we've seen, they played clean football almost the entire season, right? I think, Lamar Jackson only threw, 4 interceptions the entire regular season?
Yeah.
I think it was.
Yes.
I mean, and it just seemed like the Ravens, especially early, they made too many, actually all the way through, all the way down to the last play, they made too many mistakes, right? Lamar with an early interception on, I'm not sure if it looked like a miscommunication with Rashad Bateman or just, what happened there, if he got jammed up in coverage or what. But you have an interception. That didn't lead to points, but he also had a fumble that directly led to a touchdown in the second quarter that, honestly, at a certain point, I know Lamar's a playmaker, but you have to just let a play die when it's dead, right? Sometimes just live to play the next down. The Mark Andrews fumble in the fourth quarter is going to stand out big time. That led to a Bills field goal, which we'll also get into momentarily. And then obviously Jackson drives him all the way down at the end, gets within 2 points. Andrews is wide open at the front pylon, drops the football. It's just a game where, when you're going to beat a great team and a great offense like the Ravens, it helps when they make some mistakes, right? And I think it took them a while to get the engine running in the run game, but I think we're going to remember, and the Ravens are going to really kick themselves for all of the mistakes that they made in this football game. And I do think the other element to this, some of it is the Zay Flowers injury kind of hurt him, I think, and especially in the passing game. And then later in the game when Rashad Bateman went down, and they still managed to improvise an almost game-tying drive with, Andrews and Tylan Wallace and Isaiah Likely and just cobbling it together on the outside. It just, at the end of the day, there wasn't quite enough, and there was too many mistakes in order to dominate this game, and they were the team in the game that really, they beat themselves. The first team you can't let beat you is yourself, and I think that's a big part of why the Ravens lost.
Yeah, I mean, coaches say it all the time for a reason. We talk about it as coaching cliche of not turning the ball over, but at the end of the day, if you don't at least check that box and say, hey, we didn't do so much to beat ourselves in this game, then obviously you have a chance. And it's a professional game. You go back and forth. The margin for error is very slim, but look, I think the Ravens, it's tricky to say the better team because I thought that these were two very evenly matched teams going up against each other, and it was a great game that we saw, but I think the Ravens played better in this game. They just didn't have the detrimental turnover. So the Bills' floor was a lot higher than what the Ravens was, but the Ravens had a higher EPA per play on offense, obviously had a lower EPA per play allowed on defense because of it. That's how it works with the vice versa. So I think the Ravens, in a lot of categories, were the better team. But the fact of the matter is, the Bills won the game because they played very cleanly. And we'll talk about Sean McDermott. It's definitely a talking point that we need to get to. But teams do take on the identity of their head coach. And the fact that Buffalo is so good at the fundamentals and the floor of this team is so high is what allowed them to win this game. Did they have the ceiling necessarily, the aggressiveness to be able to keep up with Baltimore? I would tell you no. But they didn't have to because they didn't shoot themselves in the foot the way that the Baltimore Ravens did. When you look at the Buffalo Bills, 0 drops in this game, 0 fumbles, 0 interceptions, 1 penalty for 10 yards. And this is a game that weather played a big factor. It was frigid in this game. And even when it wasn't snowing, the cold was affecting these players and how they moved and how focused they were. Obviously, every time they hit the turf, it felt like they were slamming on concrete because of how cold it was. So the weather and the conditions absolutely affected this game, and they played that clean. That is a clean slate of football. And on the other side of things, the Baltimore Ravens, 3 drops, 3 fumbles, 2 of them lost, 1 interception, 5 penalties for 43 yards. In a close game with 2 very evenly matched teams, that team's going to lose almost every single time. And the only reason why that almost wasn't the case is because the other team had Lamar Jackson. And even though he did have turnovers in this game that we uncharacteristically have not seen from him this season, so the turnovers were very uncharacteristic of him, he was still able to play hero ball for them. I mean, how many times in that game did you see Lamar escape the pocket, stay cool under pressure, find somebody over the middle, backside dig routes, deep passes? Like, I know that the first interception that he had obviously was a misfire on a deep shot, but he hit plenty of other deep shots to give his team the ability to win this football game. But what this comes down to is that not only did the Ravens shoot themselves in the foot, it was about how clean Buffalo played. And if you're going to go into Kansas City and do something that they have not done over the last 5 years, and that's go into Kansas City and beat them in the playoffs, that's the type of football that you do have to play. So even though there's another part of this conversation that I know we'll get to, them being able to do that is why they won this football game.
I think this edition of this Bills-Chiefs rivalry now might be the most fascinating one because it's something we've brought up in a couple of previous weeks this year, is that the Bills this year play more like the Chiefs than ever, right? Avoiding negative plays and just continuing to move forward and get first downs. That's what the Chiefs do best, especially this year with probably the least explosive offense that we've seen out of them, even with the last 2 years of not having Tyreek Hill, and they've kind of transitioned to the short passing game and the run game and just moving the chains. The Bills play more like that than ever. Allen's running his best turnover-worthy play rate of his career. They just don't beat themselves very often anymore, right? I can only think of maybe one game this year, the Texans game where Allen was like 9 for 30 or whatever it was. That was the only game they really beat themselves this year. If they can go on the road and play this clean brand of football, and they ran the ball 60% of the time in this game. Mm-hmm. I mean, and you're talking about the Ravens.
They were also excellent at it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a part where the Bills' ability, obviously there's going to come a moment, probably next week in Kansas City, where Allen's got to be the hero. But he didn't necessarily have to do it today, even though there was one moment where I kind of would have preferred that they let him be the hero. But we can have that argument. Their ability to not solely rely on Allen, to rely on their trench play, the run game. The defense did step up today. This was, in run defense, this was about as good a game as they possibly could have played against this opponent. And just their ability not to beat themselves, that's huge. I mean, I think we see this now from the best teams all remaining, right? I think you look at the Bills, they've been as good as anybody this year. The Chiefs, they always do it. They never beat themselves. Washington and Jaden Daniels, they don't beat themselves. And the Eagles, for the most part, don't beat themselves either. They'll hand the football off, they'll play defense. Complementary football is the theme of all four of these teams, and the Bills are doing it better than they ever have.
Yeah. Look, my most impressive in this game was the Buffalo Bills offensive line. Not just of how they were ass kickers up front when it came to running the ball the way that they needed to. I mean, Josh Allen in this game was the fourth leading rusher, and that's not often the case. I think that they would like for their running backs to really be able to take most of the carries, and Josh Allen doesn't have to take the punishment. But Allen had the second most carries in this game, but he only had 20 rushing yards. Normally, when that's the case, you go, this offense probably wasn't operating the way that it needed to. But when you look at the yards per carry average, James Cook, shade under 4, was 3.9, but then Ty Johnson at 6.2, Ray Davis at 7.3. Like, these guys were able to be efficient. And I think just throughout this game, they were able to continue to pound the rock the way that they needed to. And kudos to Buffalo's offensive line, which has been one of the better offensive lines, certainly down the stretch in the second half of the season. They were great in pass protection as well. Only 4 pressures allowed in this game. So really being able to mitigate what the Baltimore Ravens have been better at, I would say, since they sort of changed things up on the defense. You and I did an episode where we talked about, hey, it wasn't just moving Kyle Hamilton and Ardarius Washington to safety spot. It was everything that sort of went along with that. You're moving Marlon Humphrey into the slot. You're blitzing a little bit less. You're letting guys get home with 4 a little bit more because you're comfortable with the guys on the back end. And so Buffalo was just able to mitigate that pretty well. And again, not to say it was easy for them, but they stepped up to the challenge. And I think, again, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we'll talk about exactly what went into the Texans and the Chiefs game, but a big Achilles heel for the Texans that entire game, especially those last couple of drives, and especially that very last drive, was not being able to protect. I'm not nearly as worried about that with this Buffalo Bills offensive line. It's going to play pissed off, and they're going to play ready for these guys. So in a little bit of a recap, but also looking forward thing, them being my most impressive is incredibly important for them to go into Kansas City and try to mitigate a pass rush that has a lot of different things that can throw at you, especially a future Hall of Famer in Chris Jones. So that was my most impressive in this game. Who is your most impressive?
I'm going the trenches on the other side. You saw some of those guys in that top 5. The defensive line, if the initial grades hold here, because I have their defensive line as a unit at an 81.6 overall in this game and an 82.3 run defense grade, that's their best performance of the season in both of them. And you saw guys who at times have struggled this year. Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones. We got Greg Rousseau off the edge. Von Miller, you see a little bit. He had the big fumble return that put him near the 20-yard line. This defensive line played its best game of the season, and I think there's a couple of elements to this. When Derrick Henry runs for at least 90 yards, Ravens are 11-0 this year. 84 yards in this game. When he's under 90 yards, 2-6. And I think the defensive, they just set a tone early. There was a surge in the third quarter. A large chunk of the Ravens rushing came in that third quarter surge when they almost tied they went for 2 and still didn't get it. They almost tied the game, but they had a big drive where they just pretty much ran the whole way down. But other than that one drive, the Bills' run defense was fantastic. It started up front, and in the first half, the Ravens as a team only had 14 yards before contact. They needed to come out, and at the very least, early in the game, the plan is clear against the Ravens. It's not easy to do with the freaks they have in the backfield, but stop the run early, get ahead of them, hopefully by 2 scores, which they did. That drive that the Bills scored the touchdown right before the half to go up 21-10, massive to get up 2 scores on that team that's shorthanded at receiver and wants to run the football, because it is a little bit harder and it takes a little more gumption to keep running the ball when you're behind like that. Now, it did work for the Ravens in the third quarter, but you still have them playing from behind, and that's what you want. This defensive line stepped up in a huge way. If they can play like this again and play in the trenches like this on both sides again against Kansas City, major shot to go in there and win, because that's a big difference, especially when you're talking about Creed Humphrey and that interior for the Chiefs. Animals in there. You know what they want to do. They want to get physical. Sometimes the Bills have, actually a lot of times the Bills have struggled to match that this year. They matched it in this game, and it was a big factor for them.
My most disappointing, unfortunately, one of us has to say it, and you're going to bring up a bigger topic that I want to talk about here in a second, but Mark Andrews has to be. Just an absolutely back-breaking fumble that he has where he's trying to make a move over the middle where it just felt like he was kind of doing too much. That was a situation where it's so hard to criticize a guy in that moment, because it is. Football is just, it's a split-second thing, especially when you're playing that fast at that level. But there's not really any chance for a return on investment for what he's trying to do on that play. I mean, he's trying to make a guy miss just to go into another tackler, and I get that anything could happen, but it was really the time for, okay, catch it, here comes a guy, time to secure it, and we're going to go down here, and we're going to live the fight another down. The ball gets punched out. Obviously, fumbles happen, so it's like, all right, well, okay, it's a bad play. It is what it is. And then, obviously, you have the play at the very end of the game that could have tied it up where, is it the best throw Lamar Jackson's ever made? No. Look, Mark Andrews absolutely should have caught that football. So I think that both of those things can absolutely be true here. And you feel for a guy who is, over the last 5 years, been a major part of what this Ravens offense has been. Whether they were passing a little or passing a lot, he's been a major part of what their identity has been. And it's just really hard to look at the box score and look at the reps and know that his presence could have meant a lot to this game in the wrong direction. And he's a great football player, and it's really hard when you have really good football players who have games like this. But there's no other way to say it's disappointing when you have those two plays, and they mean so much to the scoreboard when you only lose this game by 2 points.
It's tough. You need your best players to step up, and he is one of their best players. He's been one of their best players for a long time, and I obviously the drop is going to sting. I mean, it's hard to pile on him when he's done so much work for so many years, so much great work for so many years. But that's tough, and I think it's just, again, symbolic of all of the mistakes they made throughout this game. The Ravens had a million opportunities to win this game, and I'll go to mine real quick. I was trying to find a different one, but man, this just stressed me out. That whole situation that we got to with Lamar and a potential game-tying drive and Andrews drop, I'm not a fan at all of.
You've got to go for that, man.
Yeah, I am not a fan at all of kicking that field goal. I know if they're up 6 to go up 9, yeah, absolutely, any day of the week.
Yeah, well, right, but that's the whole point.
When you're
going for it to make it the 2-possession game.
When you're going against, there's a set of guys. When you're going against them, Mahomes, Lamar, Burrow, Allen, maybe Jaden Daniels, even the Lions. I love the way, we'll get to Dan Quinn and all that, but I love the way the Commanders stayed aggressive in that game.
We'll get to that.
You have to go for the throat. Like, I am not a fan.
Okay, go on. I don't want to cut you off.
Like, you have Josh Allen. I know he was stuffed the play before, and that was the big argument probably, even on the sideline as well. But you ran that same exact play earlier and scored on it. When you came out in the formation, they saw it coming, okay? Mm-hmm. Plus the guard was another foot back from the rest of the line that bothered me. But that field goal, that's a soft field goal. To me, I cannot leave Lamar Jackson a pulse. You know for a fact, John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson, Todd Monken, everybody on that sideline, when they came out and sent Tyler Bass out there to kick that field goal, they were raising their hands to the sky because we're like, wow, we get a chance. Right? And I get it. If you don't get it, you're down 5. But also, they get the ball at the 2-yard line. And even if they go down and score in the same fashion, okay, you get a minute and a half with Josh Allen. Try to kick a field goal. Like, there's other outcomes that aren't quite as there's that set of guys and that set of teams where you, especially in the playoffs, we live in an age now where you go for the kill. Because to leave Lamar Jackson, and now I feel like now it's inconsistent. Going into Kansas City next week, I don't know what McDermott's going to do in that spot. Because earlier in the year, when they beat the Chiefs,
he was aggressive.
He went for the kill.
Right.
And it worked.
Yes.
And actually, the Chiefs even had a good defensive play call. But because you had Josh Allen, he took off running. He did something Josh Allen-ish, right? Same spot here. I would have sent the offense out there. I'm going for the kill. And if they go 98 yards, then we have to live with that scenario from there. And I know there's a lot of people that are going to backlash this and go, well, because they kicked the field goal, they were up 8, and they had – with this Bills defense and with 17 as your quarterback,
yeah,
you win the game with him. I really think it's bad process, especially when you think about they only finished it off because Mark Andrews dropped the ball.
Right.
I mean, it was wide open.
And I think you also have to be honest about, and I think that's a tough part, right? It's a very blurred line that you have here between believing in your guys and then being honest about where you're at.
And they're losing guys left and right.
Right.
I mean,
you have to think
Taylor
about
Rapp's out and Taron Johnson's playing with one arm and you're facing Lamar Jackson. It's a whole scenario.
The depleted secondary that you already have. And you also have to recognize, like, what are you hoping for from your defense? You're not hoping that, let's shut them down like we have all game. You haven't.
And there was 3.5.
You haven't.
There was 3.5 minutes. If there was 30 seconds, I might defend it more. But there was 3.5 minutes.
You just had the turnovers, right? You didn't stop Lamar Jackson and company all day. It's not like you've been clamping down. It's not like you go, hey, we're going to bet on our defense because they've been shutting them down all day. No, they haven't. They've just been giving you the football. So not only did I hate it from that logic, but I hate it the most because you took the ball out of your MVP's hands and gave it to theirs. That's what you decided to do. The thing that frustrates me the most about this is
it's playing not to lose.
And I hate that. And it's also like I want the best of Kansas City versus Buffalo. Like these two teams have given us some instant classics over the last 4 years. If you coach like this in Kansas City, you will not win. They will beat you. They will be on to the Super Bowl. Your season will be over. And I hope somebody can tell that to Sean McDermott. Is that it's just you cannot think that way. You cannot have the thought process that he had in this game because his team was not playing better. The Baltimore Ravens were playing better than you the whole game. But you had a chance to, what was it, 3 yards, 4 yards? What was it?
2.5, maybe 3.
Something like that? Because I think they lost a couple because he got stuffed or whatever.
They were at no more than 3 yards. And even then I go,
you got 3 yards.
Get 3 yards.
You got 3 yards with one of the alien football players as your quarterback, guaranteed to touch the football, with Joe Brady as his offensive coordinator calling a brilliant game. I know you got stuffed. You got to believe in your guys more than that. You got to believe in Josh Allen more than you believed in your defense for kicking the field goal and setting themselves up that way. That's my only.
Because you know what will happen is next week when you play the Chiefs, they won't turn the ball over 3 times, and Travis Kelce won't drop the ball at the front pylon, and you'll get burned being too cautious. Every team that's too cautious against the Chiefs, they lose.
I want the best version of the Buffalo Bills versus the Kansas City Chiefs because we're in for another, again, classic game between these two guys. But Sean McDermott's got to go back to the reasons why they were able to beat them earlier this season.
At the end of the day, if they're going to win a Super Bowl, it's because of number 17.
It's going to be because you're going to get aggressive because the two teams that are on the NFC side of things, they're not afraid at all whatsoever to be aggressive in what they need to do. But we'll get to that in a second. First, I got a question for you guys before we go on to the next game. What does your child's success look like to you in the future? Maybe it's a job that they're passionate about. Maybe it's traveling the world. Maybe it's just being happy and comfortable. Whatever it is, Fabric by Gerber Life can help you achieve that with a kids investment account. By making a contribution to your child's future today, you can give them the means to pursue their dreams, big or small, whatever they are. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids, they can't invest while they're minors, but a kids investment account allows you to invest on their behalf, giving their investments so much more time to grow. The funds can be used for anything. You know, when they're kids, it's summer school, it's after school activities, sporting events, things like that. You know, when they're a young adult, could be a first car, a first house, whatever. The whole thing is online, very easy to set up an account. Could take you just 5 minutes, and then you just manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family today. Start investing in your child's future at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, the next game, the one that happened right before Bills-Ravens. Rams and the Eagles. Philly ends up winning this game 28-22. This is a funny game, right? Because it looked like, Saquon Barkley is running in the end zone. There it is. The game's over. And then, like our boss Chris Collins were said on the broadcast, hold on a second. This game was supposed to be over 4 minutes ago. And now all of a sudden we're coming down to the wire here. Let's look at the top 5 graded players for each team, the initial grades that we have here right after the game. On Philadelphia's side of things, holy cow, their offensive guard, Landon Dickerson, a 94.5 initial grade. Jalen Carter, just an absolute game wrecker. One of the reasons why Philadelphia won this game at a 91.3. Running back Saquon Barkley with a 74.1. Linebacker Zach Bond, a 72.6. And linebacker Cooper DeJean with a 72.0. Jalen Hurts in this one, 62.3 overall grade. On the Rams side of things, edge rusher Jared Verse caps off a phenomenal rookie season. I know they lost, so it's not how he wanted things to end, but number one on this list at a 78.4, the highest graded player for the Rams. Offensive tackle Eric Jackson with a 75.6. Edge rusher Michael Hoyt with a 73.4. Wide receiver Puka Nacua with a 73.0. Guard Steve Avila at 71.9. And then quarterback Matthew Stafford with a 55.5 in this game. stat that told the story. Dalton, what do we got?
It is tough, kind of similar to what we just got from the Ravens. It's tough not to think about these 3 fumbles the Rams had in the second half. 2 of them lost. We'll go down through them in order. Matt Stafford on what was arguably the Rams' best drive of the day, maybe before the final 2 drives, was a drive all the way down to the 8-yard line. He goes to hand it off to Kyren Williams. It just slips straight out of his hand. Williams recovers it. They're back at 2nd and goal in the 15, and against this defense in the snow like that, going to be real hard to score a touchdown on 2nd and 15, right? I would argue, again, right now it's the best defense in football, especially when it comes up to preventing explosive plays. Then you had the Kyren Williams fumble, which got to me because that's another running back with a ball in his inside arm, and Jalen Carter punched it out. That led to an Eagles field goal in, at the time, what was a 1-point game, gave the Eagles 3 more points, and then there was a strip sack of Stafford that led to 3 more points for the Eagles that made it 22-15. It's little mistakes like that, even if it's 3 and 4 points at a time. It took 4 points off the board for the Rams. It puts 6 on the board for the Eagles. You eventually get to a 6-point game. You can do all the math however you want to do it, but again, you can't beat yourself. And I know it's tough conditions. And I know you're the team that plays in a dome from L.A. coming into Philly where all of a sudden it just started pouring snow in the second half. You just can't have the turnovers. You can't lose. It's 2-0 in the turnover battle in this game.
Yep.
The third, that other fumble, like I mentioned, the first one on the Stafford to handoff, cost you 4 points. That straight up in a spot where the Rams in the middle of this game had a ton of momentum, a ton of it, especially going into halftime when Jalen Hurts got sacked and they were still close to field goal range. And Nick Sirianni kind of just decides to run the clock out. I think Sean McVay felt great about being down just 13-10 at halftime. The Rams had a lot of momentum, but these fumbles killed it every single time that they had it in the second half.
Yeah, I think the Rams were actually a really good matchup to upset the Philadelphia Eagles in this game. And then I saw what the forecast was like, and I went, oh, yeah, Philly's going to win this game. And that's sort of what it came down to. Now, I don't say any of this to take away what Philadelphia was able to do. Saquon Barkley was a monster. Jalen Carter was a monster. Philly's O-line was still able to do what they needed to do. I felt like there were players along Philadelphia's defense that were very aggressive in this game and big reasons why they were able to come up big, but they played better in the elements. And I think that we have to be able to admit that the elements play a role in how games end if we want to sit here and say, like, oh, yeah, this is playoff football. This is how it goes. This also goes into things. If this game was in a dome, I really feel like the Rams would have won this football game. But a couple of the turnovers there, I think the Kyren Lacy, who is a strong-handed running back, like I don't think it's in his nature to fumble the ball and put the ball on the ground. Now it was a clean punch out. And so again, I don't want to take anything away from the Eagles defenders that were able to punch it out and get on top of it. That's a kudos to them. But like you could tell Matthew Stafford's ball security was not the same. And again, you could sit here and say, well, Philadelphia had to deal with the same thing. They did, and they handled it better. That's what I'm trying to say here. But if this game is played without these elements of snow, I think the Rams were on fire, and I think the Rams were moving the ball easier and in better fashion. And I think that you see that with even the common statistics of 324 passing yards for Matthew Stafford, over 100 rushing yards for Kyren Williams. You had guys on the Rams defense that were really stepping up as well. So this is another game, much like the Baltimore and Buffalo game. The weather and the snow played a big factor, and one team was more prepared and played cleaner football in the elements. And those are the two teams that won tonight. And to me, like I could sit here and say, hey, I think the Ravens were the better team against the Buffalo Bills. And I can sit here and say, hey, I think the Rams probably would have won this game if this is an indoor football game. But that's not what happened. And the two teams that did win were the ones that were able to handle the elements a little bit better. And kudos to Philadelphia, too. And certainly their general manager, Howie Roseman, how they've constructed this team. They're built to be able to do that, right? I mean, they're built to be a team that has the ability to still play their brand of football and their type of clean football when things are less ideal, when there are things outside of your control. And so I think Philadelphia does a great job doing that. But the stat that told the story to me is just the fact that there was a 100% chance of precipitation in this game with the snow, because I think it really curbed how explosive the Rams were able to be in this game.
Yeah, no, and I think, credit. I want to credit Matt Stafford too, though, because by the numbers, it's going to look like it was a struggle. I think right now he's got 4 turnover-worthy plays on the book, but Man, he battled. He battled through, and he had him 20 yards from winning this game too. And it's tough to go against that defense. When your pass protection is kind of breaking down, and you still have to make big throws in big spots, and Puka Nakua's making plays, and you're trying to do everything you can in one of the most hostile, stadiums in the league. I think he battled through as much as he could, but it's tough. Like we mentioned, the mistakes are just too much. You have to be able to handle the conditions. And credit to Howie Roseman. They're great in the trenches. Mm-hmm. They can run the hell out of the football, as we already know, and their defense is fantastic. And that's even battling through the Quinyon Mitchell injury was a big factor, I thought, in the Rams coming back.
Which I believe I saw afterwards he said he was fine. So it looks like he's going to be able to play next week.
Oh, they're certainly going to need him, that's for sure. Next week. But no, I thought, again, Stafford settled in and started to find it. There was key mistakes, and then he almost drove him back one more time, and that's kind of the magic of Matt Stafford. But the Eagles, they buckled down when they needed to, and they leaned into their strengths, and that's complementary football, running the ball, and preventing too many explosive plays. There was a couple at the end, but they stuck with their bread and butter, and that was just good enough to win in these conditions.
Saquon Barkley is my most impressive in this game because as much as, we credit offensive line for great rushing attacks, and we've got the grades to show that Philly's offensive line play well, led by Landon Dickerson, who had a 94.5 overall grade in this one. Saquon Barkley, 26 carries, 205 yards, a 7.9 yards per carry average. He had the 2 touchdowns, and he had a long run of 78 yards, and I think that's the one that stands out to me is like that run is why you sign Saquon Barkley. And of course, like it's blocked up pretty well. It's not like he had to throw 8 guys off of him to make that run happen, but he was able to see the vision of where the running lane was going to be, put his foot in the ground, fire up field, and he had the athleticism to take it to the house because there was a chance that one of those defenders, I can't remember exactly who it was, got their arm out, and I can't remember if they were able to hook him a little bit, but he had the strength, he had the speed and that momentum to get by and to score that touchdown that ended up obviously meaning so much and winning the game for them. So shout out to Saquon Barkley. It's been an unbelievable year for him. What an incredible signing. We've talked about this before on this show. Just because Saquon's doing what he's doing in Philadelphia doesn't necessarily mean that the Giants letting him walk was the wrong decision. Very clearly, the Giants were not that kind of a team that was ready to pay a running back like that a lot of money because the rest of the team wasn't where it needed to be. With the Giants had maybe won an extra game, maybe 2 if they had Saquon Barkley, just because things play out a little bit differently. They don't have to have the ball in the hands of the quarterback as much, maybe, but what's 2 extra wins going to do for you? Nothing. You've got to be able to build a team a little bit better. Philadelphia, on the other hand, the perfect team to sign Saquon Barkley because everything else is already there for you, and it's such a potent part of what they have wanted to really do well, and he's the best back that they've had over the last couple of years to lean into that strategy. So Saquon Barkley, the most impressive for me in this game. What about you?
Oh, boy, they got an elite player on the other side. We've talked about their O-line a lot, but how good is Jalen Carter? That's just an elite football player, and it feels like we all knew it when he was drafted, and then he gets drafted to Philly. The Bears trade down a spot. They let the Eagles take Carter. Just a freak. A 91.1 run defense grade, 78.2 pass rush grade, 6 pressures, 2 sacks, the forced Kyron Williams fumble. To recognize as he's still being blocked that Kyron's got the ball in his inside arm and his right arm, and to just take that swipe with the one free hand that he has and punch that ball. And then you have the 2 pressures at the end. One of them the Rams blew the protection on, but the second one on 4th down that ended the game, he just clean beat Bo Limmer right off the ball. Jalen Carter is one of, what do you think, 5 or 6 best defensive tackles in the league?
Oh, yeah.
Somewhere in there, it's top 5. He's just, you talk about your best player on a defense full of fantastic football players, Zach Bond, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Nolan Smith, all these guys. Jalen Carter's the best of all of them, and we're about to watch him be a top 3 to 5 defensive tackle for the next decade. Because, in a game like this, and especially at the end, the last 2 pressures for me, and I know one of them was kind of sort of given to him, the first one, to come up that big in that moment, that's Aaron Donald type of stuff. The team on the other side saw that for a decade, right? It's just, he's so good, and when your best players like Barkley, like Carter, step up like that, just incredible stuff. And I'm just gonna flip it over to the most disappointing. Just the Rams, they had to pass protect. They had to be better. against Carter and those guys inside. You know, when you talk about Milton Williams and Moro Ajomo and guys like that inside. Kevin Dotson allowed 4 pressures. He had a pass protection grade in the 30s. Bo Limmer allowed 4 pressures. Steve Avila with a 63 pass blocking grade. Just they got beat on the inside on too many occasions here, especially in pass protection when it mattered most. And with a quarterback who's relatively immobile like Matt Stafford, you have to have interior pass protection. Jalen Carter won the battle front to back. And then, again, the forced fumble on Kyren Williams, that's one of the best plays you'll see all year.
Yeah, I mean, top defensive tackles in the NFL. Chris Jones, Dexter Lawrence, Cam Hayward, Quinnen Williams, Jalen Carter.
I mean, this
right?
year,
I mean, like he's next and in that group with how well he has been able to play. And I think that it gets, if you go into next year and he can stay this consistently dominant, well, obviously now we're talking about a tier 1 difference maker at the NFL level in that same tier with those guys. My most disappointing, unfortunately, has to be Kyren Williams because he's somebody that's just, I think, is such a reliable player for them. I've talked about how, hey, we talk about Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Sean McVay, the passing offense for the Los Angeles Rams. But it's really Kyren Williams that is the engine that makes everything go. The other guys are just kind of like built around him because when they don't have him running the ball really well, they become one-dimensional. That's when you can beat this offense, even for as good of a passing attack as they have. And it was another, I think, solid day for Kyren Williams, especially given the circumstances and the elements, but it's the fumble that'll haunt him. And that was something that was tough. So it's disappointing when a great back like that, just like we talked about with Mark Andrews, it's tough when a good player has these plays where you just go, God, it's not you. It's just, it happens with the game and it's brutal. I felt like that was Kyren Williams. What about you? Most disappointing?
No, again, just the Rams offensive line, just kind of getting beat on the inside. You know, it's. Again, I think it's another theme we're seeing. Mistakes is one, but the teams that are pass protecting better right now in each of these games, those are the teams that are winning. If you don't have big-time pass protection at this time of the year, you're not gonna get all the way. And I think that's where the Rams, it was down early in the year because of injuries. It got better as the year went on, but they faced the Eagles in the snow and things got hard, and it just wasn't quite enough. So, no, I mean, it was a great year for the Rams. Winning the division, obviously, coming back from, 1-4 to win this division and get this far and win a playoff game and play in a game. A fantastic year for the Rams considering how it started. And look, the Eagles, at the end of the day, they just proved they're the better team. And now they get to play another home game in the NFC title game.
Such a young defense for the Rams, too. I'm excited to see how they grow and what they are next year, because especially along that defensive front. I mean, that whole front seven with the defensive line and the linebackers, man. That's going to be fun to watch because they got some good ones in there. All right, we are going to talk about the Saturday games. Before we get to it, got to tell you guys that this podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Cherry Bundy, the performance drink that is fueling the health-elite revolution. If you guys live an active lifestyle at all whatsoever, whether you're lifting weights, you go on a run every day, you go run every week, even if that's, how frequent it is for you. If you do CrossFit every single day, whatever it is, Cherry Bundy's got the products to be able to help you recover, to make sure that you are at optimal performance, that your muscles are recovering, everything. Natural products, natural ingredients, no added sugar to it. The tart cherries that it's made from, the highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the world. It's got anti-inflammatory with incredible benefits, reduce soreness, increase recovery, natural melatonin to help improve sleep, helps support immunity as well. Feels like everybody's sick around this time of year. Helps you with that as well. Nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams use it. 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champs. I can go on and on. The products are available at Amazon, cherrybundy.com, retailers nationwide. You can check your local retailers, Publix, Kroger, all that good stuff. It's fantastic. I've tried it before. I absolutely love it. So if you guys are active at all whatsoever, check it out, Cherry Bundy. They've got a lot of really great products, not just the drinks, but the gels, the things to help you sleep specifically, things that will help you recover, things that will get you hyped up for a workout, all kinds of stuff. Check it out over at cherrybundy.com. Commanders and Lions, we're going in descending order from the schedule, remember, so we're starting on Saturday night. Man, the game that a lot of people probably thought they were never going to see, right? One, Jaden Daniels playing the way that he has this year to accelerate the rebuild for Washington, not just making the playoffs, but going into Tampa Bay and beating the Buccaneers. Then going to Detroit, and everybody goes, hey, great year, great story for Washington, really root for them, but, it's the Lions, right? Well, they were absolutely fearless. They go into Detroit and beat that team 45-31. The top 5 graded players that we have for the Washington Commanders, running back Austin Eckler at the very top of the list with a 90.8 with some key plays. in this game. Defensive tackle John Allen an 80.5. Wide receiver Terry McLaurin a 77.7. Safety Quan Martin a 75.6 for that pick six. Wide receiver Jameson Crowder a 73.9. And then quarterback Jaden Daniels a 79.9. On the Lions side of things, safety Brian Branch with a 92.9. Guard Christian Mahogany a 92.2. Offensive tackle Penny Sewell a 90.1. Wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown at an 80.3, and then running back Jahmyr Gibbs rounding us out at number 5 with a 78.9. Jared Goff in this game, just a 45.5 overall grade. Stat that told the story here. What do we got?
Boy, I get to talk about Jaden Daniels
Your
for
favorite.
one more week. For
Your
one more
favorite.
week, I get to talk about QB1. I absolutely love it.
Might be a couple more weeks, actually, depending on what happens next week. We'll see.
Don't think we've never had a rookie starter in the Super Bowl. Is that right? Is he going to just pull another first?
I don't know, and you know where the Super Bowl is this year.
Oh.
Ain't too far from Baton Rouge.
You're going to get every LSU Tiger down
Ain't
at
too far from Baton Rouge.
That's true.
In New Orleans.
Man, oh man. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm
just saying it out. I'm not accounting.
So here's where I was at with the Commanders, both against the Bucs and against the Lions. How effective were they going to be when teams started blitzing them?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because that was a concern for me, and I told you I thought Todd Bowles did not blitz Jaden Daniels enough in big moments, especially on 3rd and 4th down. Now I'm going into this week knowing that what is it? I think it's since week 10, they were the second worst team in pass protection against the blitz. Okay, through wild card weekend, from week 10 to wild card weekend, only ahead of the Bengals. So I'm coming in here thinking, okay, Aaron Glenn's going to come out and blitz him. And he did. He blitzed him on 47% of his dropbacks. Well, he responded by going 12 of 15 for 200 yards, a touchdown, the big-time throw to De'Ami Brown, which was just, one of the best balls I've seen thrown all year, because Brown was blindfolded at the very end of that, and the ball just dropped right in the bucket anyway. 89.9 passing grade against the blitz in this game. How many ways can Jaden Daniels just wow us? And, we know the running. We know he's accurate. We know he's got a top 5 turnover-worthy play rate. Now I'm concerned, okay, late in the season, teams are starting to blitz the living hell out of Washington. And it's starting to work, because even if you're not forcing him into big mistakes, which he rarely makes, it's more conservative, right? It's like screens and it's 4-yard passes. And this became a very conservative offense down the stretch. They started making explosive plays in this game. And as a whole team, look, even their offensive line, 63.2 pass blocking grade against the blitz. It's their best since week 9. They were picking up blitzes. Jaden's throwing against them. As a unit, okay, the whole team, the whole offense, for a team, this is run and pass now. 182 times that an offense has been blitzed at least 20 times in a game this year, okay, run and pass. The Commanders put up the second best team offense grade of any of those 182 in this game. This is what it came down to. So now I'm like, okay, they have answers for blitzes. Deep balls are working. The screen to Terry McLaurin, which I know he's fast. I don't know that I've ever seen him that fast. That was as fast as it gets. If they have answers for blitzes now, and the Eagles aren't a high blitzing team, so it'll be different next week. If they have answers for blitzes now, then I just go, okay, this is just legitimate. They could go out here and win next week, even if Vic Fangio tries to change it up and put extra guys on the line of scrimmage, because he started doing that to Stafford in today's game, right? Mm-hmm. Throwing some extra guys with some zero blitzes late in the game. If they start picking up blitzes, and obviously it gets harder now that Sam Cosmi's torn his ACL over there at right guard, you're not going to have him. You're just going to get in a shootout with this team. That's where we're at, and that's what the Lions found themselves in. And every time now, because we got to halftime, and this game was 31-21, coming off 2 Goff interceptions. And in my head, I'm like, okay, the blitzes aren't getting home. But the Lions also can't get home with 4. So now I don't know what the answer is, because Jaden Daniels is going to get through this whole game just completely undeterred. And if he's like that, this is what this offense can do. When he's been clean, they've been a top 5 offense all year. And obviously him being at the center of it, now we got the offensive line blocking better. We got guys on the outside making plays. How big has De'Ami Brown been these 2 games? Austin Eckler stepping up. They got a lot of answers right now offensively. And now it's a fun challenge now for a team that I know Jalen Hurts came out of that game early, but they've beaten Philly once.
Right.
And they got to feel good about coming off of just beating Detroit in Detroit. Now they've already beaten Philly once. They have to feel like they have a legit chance. But as always, reason number 1 is because of Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, you're running out of ways to do a preview show of how do you stop Jaden Daniels? We're running out of ways to say how you do it. Because before it was like, all right, well, you want to make him throw over the middle. Okay, well, now he throws over the middle. Or actually, at the beginning of the season, it was, okay, you want to get him on the run because even though he's mobile, he's not really a great on-the-run passer. At least he wasn't when he was at LSU. Okay, well, he checked that box pretty early on, especially after the Tampa game in week 1. Then he starts to throw over the middle more. Now you've got him attacking in basically every single way. He'll attack man coverage. We saw in the first playoff game against the Buccaneers. I mean, that in the bucket throw that he had over Jamel Dean just straight into the hands of Terry McLaurin. I mean, it's basically Jaden's the only one to slow down Jaden Daniels at this point. If he's playing like this, hell yeah, they could beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Hell yeah, they could go win the Super Bowl. Because I don't know how you stop this player, especially when you pair it with the stat that told the story for me, and that's the Commanders' aggressiveness on 4th down. This is the identity of the team. And when you pair how aggressive this team is in the red zone and on 4th down with how well their quarterback is playing, there ain't many teams that can keep up. There's really not. So in this game, 3 for 4 on 4th down against the Detroit Lions. They have an 81.25 conversion percentage on 4th down this season. They have a 92.4 offensive grade on 4th down. It's the best in the NFL. These are bonkers numbers. You're talking about wanting to go for it on 4th down when it's a coin flip. When you convince yourself, okay, just once out of every 2 times, we'll get it. And that's enough for the math to make sense to where you could go for it. Obviously, situations sort of go into it. Okay, what part of the field, what's the risk versus what the other team's going to do. I understand there's more math that goes into it. But if you think it's a coin flip that we get this or not, a lot of times you go, all right, I'll take it. I'll take my guys in a coin flip situation. They're converting on over 80% of the 4th downs. And not only do they convert them at a high clip, they go for it a lot. They're extremely aggressive. And it's very easy to be aggressive. Sean McDermott, are you paying attention? When you have a quarterback that gives you this type of ability. If I'm a defense, I'm terrified to play against Jaden Daniels for 4 downs. It's enough to play against him for 3. So to me, the recipe of why this team is here is because they understand exactly who they are as a football team. They know what their strengths are, but they also know their weaknesses. The signs of a really good head coach is one that not only understands what they bring to the table as a team, but also where they fall short. And Dan Quinn, as a defensive guy, knows, hey, I got some dogs on defense. We did a nice job turning the page from what the roster was the year before. We're not quite there yet. We don't have a get-home pass rusher yet. We don't have a stout, there's no chance you have at running the ball on us type of a defense. We don't have lockdown corners or secondary players at every spot yet. He gets that. So in order to counter that, he goes, I got one of the best players in the world playing quarterback this year, certainly. I'm not ready to say that he's, quite in the tier 1 of quarterbacks yet, but he's certainly playing like a guy who's been unstoppable this season. And he says, I'm leaning into that. That is actually how we play better defense. That is actually how we defend teams better, by keeping our offense on the field, by giving this guy a chance every single time he has it. So for any situation that is questionable at all for them to go for it on 4th down, you better believe they're going to go for it. And you know what? It's the right damn decision. And they're here because of that mindset. So that's the stat that tells the story for me, not just for the reason why they were able to go into Detroit and beat Detroit, which would have been impressive enough, but the whole fact of how they are here and the fact that they're now playing a familiar foe and have a chance to go to the Super Bowl after a year where, man, it looked like it was going to be a couple of years down the road for Washington to even be in this spot in the playoffs. It's because of that mindset that I have, and it's a great job of that entire coaching staff, again, of recognizing not just what they do well, but also what they don't, and being able to marry that together.
I just have to wonder at some point, just once this year, sometime down this stretch, if Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury have looked at each other and just kind of asked, like, do we actually trust this kid this much? I mean, you have to. He's played like a top 5 quarterback this year, right? But it's like, this is crazy. The amount that, I mean, and they talk about, the money downs, right? 3rd and 4th down and red zone and short yardage and all of the big moments that young kids have to get used to. And he's already elite at all of it now. We really never have seen anything like this. And the amount that's the crazy part to me. The amount that they trust him in spots like this, knowing that he's their best player. I mean, I have to wonder if at any point it's made them uncomfortable, if they're really just like, you know what? He's already this good. Whatever. I mean, it's amazing. And then him also, I think what gets lost with him too, and because he's loose, and people say he goes out there and he gets hit sometimes funny, and he takes big hits, and he's as fiery a competitor. Maybe not outwardly, because he's always just got that grin on his face on the field that would scare the hell out of me, actually.
Right.
But like, he's such a competitor. He gives everything he has for 60 minutes. And I think when you have a guy that does that and believes he can win in any situation, in any building, against any team, that's everything you could ever ask for in a quarterback. And at this point, I mean, who are we to say he can't do the unthinkable at this point? Because honestly,
I think he already has in a lot of ways.
I go into this next game, and I know Jalen Hurts has made a Super Bowl and he's done a lot of things in the league, but the Eagles, probably every other spot on Philadelphia's roster, you'd give them the advantage. Washington has the better quarterback in this game.
Yep,
I
would agree.
Especially the way Hurts is throwing the ball lately. And when you have an advantage at quarterback,
you always have a chance to win.
It can equalize everything else.
Always, especially everything that Jaden brings to the table. Most impressive in this game, shouting out Christian Mahogany, the offensive lineman for the Detroit Lions, 91.9 run blocking grade and a 31.8 impact run blocking percentage. He was somebody who I liked in the draft, but I felt as though with his style of just a bigger, powerful, not as flexible, not as fleet of foot type of an offensive lineman, where he landed was always going to matter for him. He lands with a smash mouth team like the Detroit Lions, and it was a perfect fit. And for a interior offensive line that's got Kevin Zeitler and Graham Glasnow, and those guys are 32 and older, to have Christian Mahogany to be like, all right, we got this guy waiting in the wings. Here we go. He's going to be able to fill in whenever. It was a great game from him. And so for him to break out like that, I mean, he's been able to play well at certain points throughout the season. But it was a really great game for him to – I know they didn't want to end their season here, but you guys know what I mean. It was a good game for Christian Mahogany.
I think
you're most impressive.
Wasn't he a guy you had? He went in the 6th, but didn't you have somewhere around a third-round
grade
on him?
Oh, way higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember when we saw them take him, we're like –
no idea why.
It's kind of late.
No
what are we
idea
doing?
why. I think he – again, I think that he was drafted as late as he was because he – at Boston College, like, he very clearly had strengths and weaknesses. The strengths were power run game, man gap concepts between the tackles, counter, power, pulling, that kinds of stuff, duo, all of that. Like, that's where he's at his best. If you're asking him to mid and outside zone, it's not really his game. So even for teams that are more of the majority of their plays are man and gap scheme blocking concepts, you still have to throw some zone stuff in there. So I think teams were just afraid, like, okay, well, we know what we have from him between the trenches. What do we get from him when we switch it up even a little bit and go to those zone blocking scheme runs? And yeah, obviously it's a great spot that he lands in Detroit.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with another rookie as mine, and I'll tell you what, we've talked enough about Jaden, but you have to like this whole rookie class for Washington, and a guy who I think was the next guy. I think he was 6. He just barely missed that top 5 for the Commanders here. Mike Sainris still on the outside.
Stud.
I'll tell you what,
Stud.
Going back and watching that first interception when he undercut Jamison Williams on the post right before halftime, when I first watched it, I was like, what is Jared Goff doing? That ball was so late and so under and whatever. And then I watched it again on the All-22. I was like, that is just an insane play by Sainris still to undercut a ball like that. And it was back and forth with him and Jamison Williams because Jamison was getting by him. It was a speed advantage there. But 2 interceptions in this game, 5 targets, 2 catches allowed for 32 yards, 74 coverage grade. And the thing I go back to, there's 2 things with Sainris still. And really the way this whole Washington team is built is not only have they brought in good football players, they brought in leaders, okay? Mm-hmm. Jaden Daniels. Then I think about some veteran guys, right? Bobby Wagner, one of the great leaders of the last decade on defense. Guys like, Austin Eckler, like you mentioned, been around a long time, and Tyler Biadasz for the Cowboys. And Sainris still, even as a young kid, is one of those guys because at Michigan last year, so many incredible NFL talents on that team. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant we're going to talk about. Will Johnson this year. Junior Colson got drafted. So many guys on that defense, but Mike Sainris still was the heart and soul of it, right?
Yeah.
And the craziest part of this whole adjustment is that he's played over 80% of his snaps this season on the outside corner. That wasn't the plan at all. It was supposed to be, okay, maybe Emmanuel Forbes will get better. We got some other guys outside. He played almost 72% of his college snaps in the slot after transitioning over from wide receiver,
right.
mind you. So
right.
he moves to corner. They put him in the slot. The only time he really played outside at Michigan is if somebody else, usually Will Johnson, had an injury or needed to rotate out. And he's come in and he's just, sometimes at the sacrifice of his own numbers goes, well, Dan Quinn goes to him and says, look, Mikey, I need somebody outside. We're a mess. We're a train wreck on the outside. And, they traded for Marshawn Lattimore, but he was hurt for a lot of this stint. And Sainristil still goes out there, and he's just an absolute dog. He just is one of the most competitive guys on the field. And for him to get 2 interceptions and really the 2 plays that you could argue were 2 of the 3 or 4 biggest plays in this game. The interception right before halftime, when the Lions, had they put up points on that drive, and it was 31-24 or 31-28, you had a real ball game still. And then, the awareness on the trick play with the Jamison Williams throw that he intercepted to sit back and be disciplined and not fall for anything, even though Williams had already housed a reverse earlier in the game. Just an excellent football player that's going to be a leader on this defense for a long time. And his 2 interceptions, the Quan Martin pick 6 obviously was a huge turning point in this game, but Sainristil's 2 picks and his performance all year, even though his grades for the year in like the low to mid 60s, he's been so valuable for them moving outside and just going, okay, yeah, I guess it's just my job this year and we'll figure it out. We'll figure out the rest later, even though I'm really a slot guy.
Right.
Just incredible, again, what they're getting out of this whole rookie class.
Yep, I've loved it. Most disappointing, Jared Goff. One of us has to talk about it here. 23 for 40 in this game, 313 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, 44.3 passing grade, 2 big-time throws, 4 turnover-worthy plays. It sucks. I don't think Jared Goff's a tier 1 or tier 2 quarterback in this league, but he's better than what we saw this weekend. This was one of his worst games that we have seen since the beginning part of the year, where they were struggling through the first couple of weeks when they struggled a little bit out of the gate. He's been great with Ben Johnson over the last couple of years. And just like I talked about when I was talking about the Bills and the Chiefs, like, you want these teams at their best. And this was not the best from Detroit. And I think that's what makes it sting so hard, is that on offense, this was not their best. I think their quarterback played one of the worst games that he's played all season. And then on the defensive side of things for Detroit, it often in this game, in this league, getting to the Super Bowl is sometimes who just survives the season better. And there are very few teams that survived the season less than the Detroit Lions did. And that just, it sucks. So we're going to look back on this team and think, what if with a lot of these injuries? And even without the injuries, if Goff doesn't play one of the worst games that he has played this year, maybe this story is a little bit different. So it's the most disappointing there, because even if you're not the biggest believer in Jared Goff, this was one of the worst games that he's played, even to the standards that we have seen this so far this season from him, and really over the last couple of years. So that's a disappointing part of it, is a really good team in Detroit just did not put their best foot forward in this game, even to give as much kudos as we do to Washington.
And the fear was, among all the mountain of injuries that they had, because there was a mountain of them. What is it, at one point, 13 defensive players were on IR, I think? I think it was 13.
I think 12 guys who had been starters for them on defense were out at some point this year.
But there's one that stands above the rest of them.
Of course.
And, of course, it's Aiden Hutchinson. When you consider the first 6 weeks, the 6 games that Hutchinson played in, the Lions had the best pass rush grade in football. Obviously, he's the biggest part of that. He was on his way to win a Defensive Player of the Year. He was going to do it had he played the whole season. Since he went out, since Week 7, 27th in this game, 52.1 pass rush grade, their second worst of the season. No sacks, not a single player with a pass rush grade above 70. At the end of it all, if it didn't get him this week, the Hutchinson injury alone probably, and it was a thought at the time that was the fear, probably cost him a shot to win a Super Bowl. Because the pass rush, they was so dependent on him, and there was too many games. After the Zadarius Smith trade, there was a couple of games where they showed a pulse, but it was just nowhere close to the same production. And in this game against Daniels throwing the ball the way he's throwing right now, against an offensive line that's not particularly great, you have to be able to get pressure. If you don't get any pressure at all on quarterbacks in the playoffs, you're not going to have much of a chance.
Yep. It's tough. This Lions team has been so much fun to watch over the last 2 years. And again, it's always a bummer when only one team can win. right? I mean, it's the beauty of this game of sports is that only one team can win. But it sucks when you get to the playoffs and one of those teams does not put forth the best effort they possibly can. And unfortunately, that was Detroit's story in a handful of ways. That's why Washington's moving on. But we talked about why that's exciting with them facing off against Philadelphia. We got one more game that we're going to get to. We're going to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans and sort of what the Chiefs are going to be moving forward. But before we get to that, got a question. Have you guys played Pick 6 from DraftKings? If not, what are you waiting for? Time is running out for you. Playoffs are here. We only got one more weekend before the Super Bowl. As the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. You can play for better payouts on Pick 6. It is super easy to get started. You select 2 or more players, choose if they will have more or less of a single stack. Could be receptions, could be tackles, could be sacks, could be passing touchdowns, whatever it is. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Texas, California, Georgia, Missouri, so many more. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for those first-time users. New Pick 6 customers, you play $5 on any set, you get 50 in Pick 6 credits. Look, Buffalo going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. They've already played this season. Khalil Shakir was the leading receiver for the Buffalo Bills. He had 70 yards the last time they matched up. He had 12 targets. If you think, hey, there was the recipe, they're going straight back to it, check out his line. I bet it's a little bit less, so you might be able to bet more there, and you might like the results. Or you can do that with any sort of matchup, no matter what it is. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use the promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF for new customers to play $5 and then get those 50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus is awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. The Houston Texans and the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City victorious in this one, 23-14. They advance to their 7th straight AFC Championship game, which is
it's a lot
bonkers to say. I think the Patriots went to 8 in a row. Think they got them by 1, but Chiefs had another one. 7 in a row. Incredible. Let's take a look at the top 5 graded players for the Kansas City Chiefs in this game. Look at that, the ageless one. They said he was dead. They said he couldn't do it anymore, that he was washed.
He shaves off 5 years.
He's too old. It's playoff Travis Kelce. Come on. You knew this was happening.
2 of them at the top there.
He's at the very top. Well, look, Chris Jones has been doing it all season. Travis Kelce has not, but here we go. Kudos, 91.0 overall grade for Travis Kelce, the future Hall of Famer. Defensive tackle Chris Jones with a 79.0 at number 2. Charles Omenihu in the 3 spot with a 77.5. Cornerback Trent McDuffie, 74.4. Linebacker Drew Tranquil, a 73.8. And then Patrick Mahomes in this one, a 73.0. On Houston side of things, wide receiver Nico Collins, as he often is, at the very top of the list with an 85.5. Edge rusher Will Anderson Jr. with an 81.9. Edge rusher Danielle Hunter with an 80.8. Man, what a season that duo has had. They've been unbelievable this year. I know it's in a loss. Season didn't end when they wanted to, but hats off to them. Incredible job this season. Offensive tackle Laramie Tunsil at the 4 spot with a 75.9, and the linebacker Henry To'o with a 74.6. CJ Stroud in this one an 85.3. Stat that told the story here, Dalton.
Okay, so amid all of there was some controversy in this game, as we know.
Was there a Chiefs game? Controversy?
Just a weekly tradition.
I don't know about that.
There was some special teams issues, which seemed to prop up all the time for opposing teams going into Arrowhead. That seems to be a theme this year. At the end of all the other Texans' mistakes, I think if they just had any sort of respectable pass protection in this game, they very well could have won it. C.J. Stroud pressured on 53.7% of his dropbacks. If he's pressured, if your quarterback's pressured at least 40% of the time, you're having issues. When you're over 50, you almost can't win a ball game. 40 for a team that had been struggling to pass protect all season. A 44.9 pass blocking grade, that was their season low. C.J. Stroud in a clean pocket, 94.6 grade in this game. Under pressure, 56.6, which actually isn't horrible, but you just can't allow pressure 54% of the time. That's all this comes down to. That's all to me, aside from the injuries, obviously, to Tank Dillon, Stephon Diggs, and honestly, Stroud.
Which are big, right, in the grand scheme of things.
They're huge. And Stroud even found ways to work around that to guys, with Joe Mixon running the ball, with Xavier Hutchinson made some big catches in this game. Nico Collins is obviously a freak of nature. He's their best player on offense outside of Stroud. But if you can't pass protect in big spots against good teams and eventually against defensive coordinators like Steve Spagnuolo, who are going to bring the absolute heat when it matters, and especially who feels comfortable with guys like Stingley and Lassiter on the outside running man coverage against Collins and your group of very pedestrian receivers without Dell and Diggs. And even with those two, you have to be able to pass protect. And I worry about I'm watching this game with Stroud, and then I just go, man, this looks a lot like Burrow and the Bengals. It's like if you can protect this guy, he can move. You mentioned the tiers. Stroud can move into tier 1 if you just protect him. Please, for the rest of us, figure out how to. Laramie Tunsil at left tackle, we're cool. Yeah, no issue there. The other 4 spots, please, Houston, figure this out so we can see a full season of MVP level CJ Stroud. Because I think he can get on that. This game looks so much to me like Burrow and just having to process things faster than he even should, and still finding ways to succeed. Because again, if that number instead of 54 is 35, the pressure rate, I think the Texans win this game. That's how good he was when it was at seeing the field, making the right throws when he was in a clean pocket.
I don't know if I'll ever say that because of this stat that I'm about to say.
It's the voodoo's still there in Arrowhead, and maybe we'll see it again next week. But the Texans, if they can just, and we've said this with the Bengals for years on end, if they can just find decent, I'm not asking for Eagles level pass protection, just decent 12th ranked in the league pass protection. Watch what CJ Stroud can do. But if you're pressured 54% of the time, you can't win a playoff game.
My most disappointing in this game was the main culprit there, and that's rookie Blake Fisher. And I feel bad for him because he's a rookie going up against the Kansas City Chiefs and everything that Steve Spagnuolo is going to throw at you. Anytime you're a rookie playing along the offensive line, or if you're struggling along the offensive line, it's like when a backup corner comes in for a starter who gets hurt, and the offense immediately goes, we're throwing at that guy. It's kind of like, all right, we got a young guy on the offensive line. Steve Spagnuolo is like, we're going to overload that guy. And unfortunately, it was right tackle Blake Fisher in this one. 33.7 pass blocking grade, 7 pressures allowed, 16.4% pressure percentage on the whole game. That's not good. So it wasn't just Blake Fisher. It was the offense as a whole. But the Texans were not built. This Texans team is not built for a deep playoff run this year. They're not. They're built to be a good football team. But they're young in certain areas on the defensive side of things. They're still figuring it out along the interior defensive line. And then specifically the injuries that they had to the playmakers on offense throughout the year. And then the offensive line specifically. They have to get much better up front going into next year to be able to be a serious, deep playoff contender. My stat that told the story in this game, and the reason why I was joking a little bit with you with, I don't even know if that would have done it for the Houston Texans. This one's from our pal Ben Solak, who does a great job covering the NFL for ESPN. He tweeted this out after the game. Per ESPN stats and info, the Texans are the first team to outgain their opponent by more than 100 yards, not turn the ball over, and lose a postseason game. The previous teams, 49-0. I don't know how Kansas City keeps doing it.
212 total yards.
I don't know how. I do not know how Kansas City keeps doing it. Because at least in the first 2 games that we covered tonight, why did the Rams lose? Turnovers. Why did the Ravens lose? Turnovers. Texans didn't turn the ball over. They moved the ball down the field. It's just Kansas City just wins. It's wild. I think that look, I can understand that some people would say, oh my gosh, like this would be like the worst Kansas City Chiefs team out of the three-peat to win it. This would be like the most fraud team to ever win it. I'm starting to believe this is actually the most impressive. If they three-peat, if they win a Super Bowl with this team, the way that they have been playing, it is the most unbelievable example of winning culture, clutch players, and a wisdom among this coaching staff that is just we might lose more than we even win when it comes to snap-by-snap bases in a game. But we're going to win the snaps that matter the most. And those are the George Karlaftis sacks, the Chris Jones sacks, and the conversions on third down, the plays where Travis Kelce is wide open to nobody, the throws that need to be, but whatever it is, man. I know people are going to talk about the refs and the officials. I get it. It was a bad week all around for NFL officiating crews. It really was. And there were some bad calls in this Kansas City game, but there were some bad calls in some other games too. So obviously that's a factor that sometimes goes into it because it can go one way for a certain team. But I just we're running out of ways to be like, how are the Chiefs going to win by the slimmest margin of error this time? And they certainly did by, again, making history, being the first team to win under circumstances like that.
I can remember Peyton Manning saying, I think actually at his retirement press conference, the little things aren't so little. And that's what the Chiefs have on their side is the little things, right? You mentioned the 8 sacks, and we've talked about the pass protection. Texans only went 1 for 3 in the red zone. You got to finish drives against this team. Field goals, no matter how explosive or not their offense is, you got to get 7s instead of 3s and 0s. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. And the other one too that played a big factor in this is the Texans, of course, in this game at Arrowhead, they played their worst special teams game of the year. They had the long opening kickoff. They had a blocked field goal at the end. They had I think was there another missed kick? I forget the other. There was just special teams, that handful of plays that can happen, that 20 to 25 plays a game, can make a huge difference, right? Sometimes sometimes you go whole games where you don't notice any of the special teams units at all, right? And the games that you do, usually they're back-breaking plays. Mm-hmm. And you just have a scenario here where the Chiefs in all 3 phases, and very often this year, in almost every game this year, they have not gotten all 3 to click at the same time. We've seen in past years where they've gotten it to, but then this year you have, okay, all right, play a whatever game against the Broncos. Then they block a field goal at the end and win, because of course they do. Or, then maybe this is a day that Mahomes saves them the way he usually does, right? Or you get the defense with just a lights-out performance, which actually, their defense, it was still pretty good in this game. You rack up 8 sacks, you hold the team 1 for 3 in the red zone.
Right. I was going to say, they may not have all 3 phases clicking at the same time throughout the season, but they never have less than 2 out of 3.
You played
and that's why Kansas City wins.
You played an easy top 8 quarterback in this league, and you gave up 1 touchdown.
Kansas City, I cannot remember the last game that Kansas City truly lost, And every week we get teams that...
And they really only lost 1 game this year at all.
Right. And it was to a good football team, right? It's not like they're blatantly losing that football game. I'm saying there are teams, even the best teams in the NFL, that over the years, they lose football games. They do something to lose this football game.
Yeah.
If it's happened, it's very, 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 very few times that the Chiefs ever lose a football game. Normally, when you beat Kansas City, it's not about them beating themselves. You somehow have to beat them at their best because there's just not many times where they're not the best version of whatever that roster is.
I think it's probably been 3. Think about this. I think it's been 3 years, the last one I could really remember, that AFC title game against the Bengals.
Against the Bengals.
I think that's the last time I can remember them beating themselves.
And that's them sort of barely opening the door for the Bengals.
And they still lost that game in overtime.
Yeah.
For a trip to go to the Super Bowl.
The floor of the Chiefs is... I don't mean to disrespect the Patriots dynasty because perhaps it's worthy of saying that they were sort of on that similar path.
It's similar.
But what I'm saying is the floor of these teams is unbelievably high every single time they kick the ball off. It's just insane. If you don't play your best game, they are not going to give it to you. They will not lose the football game. And that's how the dynasty has gone as long as it has.
They embody that as much as Brady and Belichick did, especially in Brady's late 30s and all of. They refuse to beat themselves.
Most impressive for me is Will Anderson Jr. I'll give him a shout out. 81.9 overall grade as we saw there. 70.9 run defense grade, 74.8 pass rush grade, 2 sacks, 23.1 pass rush win percentage. I think Will Anderson took a really big step this year overall, and Yeah, I don't think we talk about him in like that top tier of edge rushers in the NFL, but I really do feel as though after this year, over the next couple of seasons, we're going to talk about him as just a pure all-around player. I'm not saying that he's about to be TJ Watt, but you know how we talk about TJ Watt is just such a great run defender, such a great pass rusher as well, just somebody who is so good at everything that it takes to be great at the edge rush position. I think Will Anderson is getting to that point.
Absolute monster. I mean, there's no other way to put that. Hard not to make it. And it's a deep group of edge players who are watching in the NFL right now, but it's hard not to have him maybe on that back end of the top 10. He's incredible. No, he's a problem. And you know what? Look, the Chiefs only had 212 yards total in this game. They're playing against a really good hot defense. Anderson and Hunter off the edge give you issues, and Stingley and Lassiter at corner give you issues. It's tough to throw outside because the Chiefs still don't have an elite receiving core. There's some good players, but they're getting locked up on the outside. But tell you what, feels good to have Old Reliable give you his best game of the season, doesn't it? And you know what? When the Chiefs, when Andy Reid asks himself, he must ask himself, okay, we're playing Houston this week. They got Stingley and Lassiter outside. I can't throw outside the numbers. What am I possibly going to do? Oh yeah, I have the greatest tight end ever. Yeah, that'll do it. And he gives us 7 catches for $117 and a 91.1 receiving grade. Okay. Hey, Travis, you mind having your best game of the year today? That'll help. You think you could do that?
I'm sure he didn't mind at all.
Well, and of course, he answered the question with a question. And he said, Coach Reid, is it playoff time? And Andy Reid goes, well, yeah. Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, I'll throw up $120 for you and just dominate over the middle in this game because you're not throwing outside on the Texans. That's not a thing. That's not going to be a thing for a few years. You mentioned it at the top. What are we supposed to say about playoff Travis Kelce at this point? It's Travis Kelce.
He's going to show up.
It's Travis Kelce and Jerry Rice. That's the numbers we keep getting thrown at us through all these broadcasts. That's how good he is in the playoffs.
Yep.
He's maybe the greatest playoff receiver ever playing tight end. The rest of the team had 9 catches for 60 yards, and the Chiefs, I believe, only had 50 yards rushing on the day. So it's just Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Steve Spagnuolo.
Doing what they needed to do.
Yeah. And the Arrowhead Voodoo, that's just where it's at.
Most disappointing for you.
Azeez Al-Shaair at linebacker, tough game. He was responsible for Kelce there a couple of times. 3 catches allowed, 63 yards, the touchdown. There was another play that Kelce had about 15 yards on that got called back due to penalty. 3 missed tackles. Big piece of the Texans' defense, but he's the one who really got taken advantage of in this game.
Yep. And then there were 4. The Bills and the Chiefs. The Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. Those are the 4 teams left that we have here in the NFL playoffs here for Conference Championship weekend coming up next weekend. I think we've got some fantastic matchups. Obviously, we did a little bit of previewing here on this show, but we're going to have another full preview show for you guys in a couple of days as we dig into that. Appreciate everybody watching this show live, a special late night edition of the PFF NFL show. For Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying we'll see you next time.